All right, so welcome back to the Present Life Podcast. My name's Aaron. I'm here as usual with AJ.
How we doing?
Yeah, we had a lot of great feedback in the first couple episodes, and honestly, we can't thank you guys enough for just tuning in, listening, sharing, providing some feedback. It's been truly a blessing to see how God is using us in this podcast already. So we're excited to see you kind of where He's taking it. I know we're only on starting episode 4 here, but yeah, did you have any shout-outs you wanted to say or anything you want to say about that?
I want to shout out your wife again. Hang out with you.
Hey, good times.
Yeah, it's been great. I've said it before. It's been life-changing for me in a lot of different ways, but it's just I'm always excited to do this, and even more so and more so. And as we talk about the different episodes that we want to have coming down the pipeline, I'm amped. I'm jacked. So we appreciate everybody that's following along and keep supporting us and pass on the good news of the Present Life podcast.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now that we've, laid a little bit of our kind of foundations of our beliefs, today and going forward, we're going to kind of try to embody a little bit more of the, quote, present aspect of this podcast. So each episode we'll be discussing a topic from kind of our present life or society, like pretty much every other podcast in the universe, right? But AJ and I believe that this life is a gift. It's, once again, the present. So we're going to be discussing kind of more with that in mind. So hopefully you are receptive to that or understanding of that too. So last time together we talked a little about fatherhood. That was deep, heartfelt. Had some crying too, but got us thinking about another aspect of society that seems a little bit misguided. And as a teacher, I feel like that is education. And so we're going to talk about school today. Public school versus homeschool. We're going to talk about implications of this new thing you might have been hearing about called school choice. That's been really popular, or at least a popular topic here in Idaho recently, and some recent trends in education. So before we do, though, I think it's kind of important to give a quick little rundown on the history of public schooling in America. So bear with me. I'm not going to give you a 40-minute, rundown here, but I feel like these couple things are super interesting and important to provide context to this whole conversation. So is that cool?
Please go. And I want everybody to know this is actually going to be really cool. And it's also, for me, as I prepared, I was kind of on edge, walking on eggshells because you are a teacher. So I'm really excited to do this. So do your thing, Mr. Teacher. Well,
don't feel like you're going to, make hurt my feelings or anything like that.
I don't know what's going to happen.
But all right. So here's your little quick history lesson. I know I'm the English teacher, but basically all through the 1700s, 1800s, schooling in America was really focused on one thing, and it was extending Sunday. It was extending Sunday school teachings throughout the week, and so it was focusing on, promoting biblical standards of morality. And in the late 1800s, early 1900s, educational theorist in particular, his name's John Dewey. I don't know if you heard of him, but he's really popular in the last 100 years of kind of philosophy in education. And he did a lot of great things, I would say. He argued those were schools to kind of teach kids how to live rather than to only be educated. And obviously there have been benefits to that kind of philosophy. On the other side, there's a guy named John D. Rockefeller, who I'm sure many of you guys know the name, but he donated $1 million at the end of the last century, or at the end of 1800s, which is $34 million in today's economy. Wow. And then eventually the Rockefeller Foundation gave $180 million over the course of the century to the General Education Board. And it wasn't just because he loved education, it was because he wanted control. And this was to really centralize and control the American education system, and was really crucial in shaping the way that our education system is today. Honestly, when I think about Rockefeller's motivation, I think about one quote from him, and it's, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." Because he didn't want people to be creative, he wanted factory workers. And I think in a lot of ways, there have been so many great advancements in the way that we teach kids over the last 100 years, but a lot more that maybe should have changed, that have not. And it starts with this mentality. So, on that note, let's get started with our chat today. First, what's your take on that quote? What comes to mind when you think about a nation of thinkers, or not a nation of thinkers, but a nation of workers?
Yeah, no, it's sad. It's sad to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm actually thinking about myself going through school and how I said in the last episode, I struggled with school. School was not for me. I wanted to be creative. I wanted to, be up and at it, and I couldn't sit still and be told what to do, get in line, do what you're told. Like, that just didn't work for me. It didn't sit right with me. It didn't feel right. I remember having conversations as a 4th, 5th grader with my mom, like, I can't do this. I'm not able to function in this.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that more. But for me, that's sad. And it makes a lot of sense based on the world we're living in right now, which, once again, we will touch on here shortly. But that's unfortunate. And, him being who he was and who that family is, one of the elites, if you will, they essentially are one of the families that are running the world, if you will. And I know everyone tries to keep it a secret. It's not a secret. And so looking at how things are laid out today and what's happening, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Unfortunately, right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, so first, let's talk about public school versus homeschool. And I think, obviously, I'm a public school teacher. You're a dad who, you guys homeschool your kids. So first, like, why did you decide on that? What was the kind of motivation? I know you touched on it a little bit last episode, that you want to spend more time with them. But tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, I mean, we really just. I mean, I work from home. I'm a real estate agent. If anybody needs help out there.
Me too, by the way. Yeah.
It's
whatever.
Together.
Yeah,
we've done plenty of deals together. So sorry to jump in front of you there, buddy. I saw an opportunity, so I took it. No, but yeah, man. So I work from home. My wife, she's a stay-at-home mom. Which, by the way, stay-at-home moms are worth about $150,000 a year. So anybody that downplays what a stay-at-home mom is worth, shame on you. So she's a stay-at-home mom. She coached high school volleyball for a long time. She was a great coach. That's how she wanted to affect lives. And I was a real estate agent, and I chose that. Well, first off, I couldn't get through school like we talked about. But something that my dad used to flip homes and stuff, and I really enjoyed that. So as I got into real estate, the reason I really jumped at it was because I wanted to be able to stay at home and be with my kids as much as possible and help raise my kids. And we decided to homeschool before we even had any of our kids in school. It's just something that we knew we wanted to do. And I'll kind of share with you how we viewed it, the public school versus the homeschool type of setup, and why it worked for us. Obviously, both being at home full time was a big deal. But public school is you got strict start times. Homeschool is more relaxed start times.
Totally, yeah.
So we like that. Public school, you're stationed at a desk, which I struggled with personally.
Me too.
And that went into our decision as well. We knew our kids were going to be active. Both my wife and I are athletes and whatnot, former athletes and coaches. So we knew they were going to be active kids most likely. So stationed at a desk was not going to work for us, and learning can happen anywhere when you're a homeschooler. We traveled for 3 months to Europe.
It's
last
awesome.
spring, and we had a history lesson in Rome, or whatever, right? So that's something that we love to do. Our passion is travel. That went into this decision big time, whether that's selfish or not. The kids love it, so we feel good about it. Public school, there's a lot more, obviously, peer pressure.
Totally.
And we viewed homeschool as more relationship building, right? We can kind of focus and hone in more on the relationship building aspect of it. Public school was more predetermined lesson plans. Homeschool is more flexible schedules and learning plans, kind of like I touched on. And then public school is homework, and homeschools, we have to worry about that. We got no homework. And then for public school, each subject is more distinctive and separate. And homeschool, they're the subjects are more intertwined and are geared for each child, depending on, because each child learns differently.
Yeah.
And we looked at that, and my wife learned much different than I did, when we had those conversations. And we went to college together, which she helped me get through a couple terms. So I appreciate you. But anyway, we looked at kind of that. Those were kind of the foundational points for us. Like, we really think this is going to work best for us and what we want to do. And I could go in depth on those, but we chose homeschool specifically for flexibility. We wanted, our focus is Jesus and his way and his word. That's number one, before math and English. And obviously you need to learn how to read and understand all that, but public schools, you stand up and you do the Pledge of Allegiance now, and or you can't even talk about God. You can't even, if you mention Jesus, you get expelled or suspended.
Well, I got a class where like 20 of my 25 kids in this class don't even stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
They don't even stand.
No.
And you would have been kicked out of school back in the day for doing that.
I mean, technically not,
Not really,
but
but
they would have been looked down on for sure.
You would definitely get. There would be an issue. There would be some sort of issue, and so we looked at that, and obviously, you know, where our world's at, the things that are going on, the agendas, the indoctrination, the propaganda. I don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but I think it's going to end up getting there. There's a lot of that going on.
Well, on that, I mean, since you say political, I just think about, like, when I was doing my credential master's program, one of the guys we read was this Brazilian, I believe he's Brazilian, philosopher named Paulo Freire. And he says, teaching is inherently political. And when I first heard that, I was like, I'm kind of not okay with that, because I didn't want to be political in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it's inherently political because you have a truth, what I believe is the truth. Mm-hmm. And there are other people that believe they have the truth or their truth or whatever that could be defined as. And they're also sharing that with the next generation.
Yeah.
So inherently what I am doing as a teacher and the morals that I'm imparting and the things that I prioritize and make important, that is inherently political. So, like, yeah, don't feel bad about getting political. Yeah. It's definitely going to be like that. Yeah.
100%. And that's very interesting, especially you being, I love hearing kind of your take on that as a teacher, and talking to you here as a teacher and being a homeschooling parent it's just, the dynamic was so interesting. But we understand each other well enough to be able to do this. But I heard a quote, and this is something that really made me feel good about our decision to homeschool as well. And I'm going to read it here for you. Children are biologically designed to educate themselves. They do it joyfully through play, questioning, and exploration. We don't need to educate children. All we need to do is to provide the conditions that would allow them to educate themselves. The basic instincts of childhood, their playfulness, their curiosity, their willfulness, their sociability, have been honed by natural selection to serve the function of education. But we take those abilities away when we put them in school and prevent them from educating themselves. So listen, I'm not saying school's completely, there are so many positive things that I got from school, so many positive things you are doing for people, but ultimately that got me just stuck and just had me thinking and realized. And then looking back on when we went and traveled for a couple months, the things that our kids got from homeschooling while we traveled and being out and about and doing those things, which is, I understand it's more of a rare type of thing, but seeing them in the environment, educating themselves, learning how to communicate with other kids from other countries without being able to understand the language.
Totally.
Was incredible.
Yeah.
And it was mesmerizing and it was beautiful. And so that quote for me makes me feel good about the choice to homeschool. But what about you? You guys haven't decided yet.
Yeah, no, we haven't. But it's funny. I even tell my students, kind of aggressively, definitely assertively, I'm like, you better understand that these four walls are not going to teach you everything you need. I'm not going to teach you everything you need. Education is the number one thing. Education and fresh water are the two things I feel like are the biggest differences between you and any other 6 billion of people on this earth. And it's not the education that you get in the four walls. It's the education that you do, like real estate. You didn't get that in four walls. Like continuing to be a real estate agent for both of us is not going to a classroom. It's being consistent with habits. It's making sure you're an expert on certain things. It's reading, it's understanding, it's networking. And so I think in a lot of ways, like we have this also just this lack of a real true definition of what education is and should be, because we think education is just go to school, where education is every single day of your life all the time. And I remember as a kid thinking like, and you talk to little kids, you're like, what do you love to do? They're like, I love to learn. You ask a high schooler, have you ever heard a high schooler say, I love to learn?
No.
And I think I don't think that has anything to do with the high schooler. I think that has to do with the environment that they put in. And honestly, for me, that's one of the things that with Sarah, I feel like has been a big bullet point, at least, or an argument for me for wanting to maybe do homeschool is, I don't want to kind of put our son or daughter or whatever in that box that I felt like kind of I was in, and then also not be able to educate them on the world. Like you said, like going to another place and talking to people, that is education. It's not knowing what 2 + 2 is. Yeah, that's great. That's going to help you. That's awesome. But overall, if I have a class of 35 kids too, I mean, how well am I able? I tell them straight up, my honors English kids, I'm like, hey, I could be the greatest teacher in the history of the world. I know that I'm not. But even if I were, it's really hard to take all of you guys to the next level, to your next level. But I can take way more advantage of like, hey, these individual conferences we have on your writing, and we'll take that to the next level. But that involves you coming in after class or us having these different things. And it's like, you know, I asked my teaching speech this year for the first time, and I asked my students, I'm like, you know, do you think it would have taken 18 weeks to get through the speech curriculum if there were only 5 kids in this class? They're like, no.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working with here. I mean, like you look at some of these things, and we can get into it a little bit more, but I looked at, you know, a breakdown of how many minutes that on average kids need to be in the classroom from pre-K to 9 through 12. And I'm just looking as a high school teacher. They say minimum homeschooling should be 20 minutes a day, total of 120 minutes a day, maximum like 45 minutes a day per class, and 270 minutes a day total. So that's like 4 or 5 hours. That's one then the recommended length of a sustained attention is one subject area. So basically what's recommended for homeschool is you have your son or daughter work on math for like 30 minutes and do something else. Whereas we're having them do math for 90 minutes and then go do 90 minutes of English and then 90 minutes of history and then 90 minutes of biology. And they started at 7:40 in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's tough because I believe that God put me in public school for a lot of reasons, and I feel like that's where I'm supposed to be. But I also think about all the time, I'm like, how close are we to where God says, no, you got to be in your house too, and you got to be in your home. And I don't know.
Do you think you're gonna, if you and your wife decide to homeschool, do you think you would face any pushback on that?
No, I don't. I know. I was just talking to one of my colleagues today, another English teacher, and I didn't realize that he homeschools his kids.
Really?
Yeah, one of them goes to a Christian school in Nampa, and 2 of them are homeschooled. No way. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. You know, he obviously teaches, so like his ex-wife does the homeschooling, and I mean that works out for them. But then I think to myself, I'm like, yeah, if we're 4 or 5 years down the road, I mean, that's why, honestly, over the next few years, I'm putting so much focus into making sure that we have other, you know, investments, income, constant cash flow, so that if I decide in 3-4 years that the best place that God wants me to be in the house and to teach Noah and to teach Juliet, then that's where I'm going to be.
So that's interesting to me, and I don't want to, like, I'm Mr. Rabbit Hole. I don't want to run off on something, but I think this is important to talk about. So then let me ask you something as a teacher. And this podcast, folks, there are going to be aspects of this podcast that we've talked about that are going to be triggering for people, but we are going to be honest and we are going to be transparent, and we are just 2 guys full of love that just want to have real conversations just up against our faith. And so I'm going to ask you this, and you don't have to answer because for whatever reason.
I will.
Do you think, no, you will. I know you will. Oh, I'm just trying to be nice. But do you think that ultimately where we're at now, as a whole, not just where you're at, but as a whole, do you think our government is really in control and running our school systems? Do you think the indoctrination and the agenda and all of that, I mean, we hear things and you see things, you know, on social media.
Oh yeah.
Do you think it's kind of U.S. government led? I
mean, I don't know if it's if the quote U.S. government is organized enough to do anything like that necessarily, but I do believe that. But I do believe that there's been such a. We talked about love and approval. And there's such a push toward, like, love is approval. And that's been such the focus. And when you have love being approval or approval being love, and you don't have the background or foundation of the word, then you just think that everybody who disagrees with you hates you. And that's what we're doing here is 10 years ago, we realized, hey, well, we should, but you guys do you. You live your life. You do whatever. And then it started being like, well, how, like, there's a fine line, but a big difference between acceptance and encouragement and tolerance and encouragement and you know, and pushing those things. Luckily, I'm at a school where I don't feel, also at high school, I don't feel like that's happening as much, especially in this state. However, I see it. I mean, I used to teach in California. I see the LA Unified School District. All the places where I had teachers and colleagues and things like that are doing some interesting indoctrination type of things. But I could tell you right now, I went to Chapman University for my master's in teaching credential, and we were taught the genderbread person. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah, they have this thing for kids now where they give you a gingerbread man, and it tells you the 5 different aspects of gender. It'll be like sex, expression, something else, whatever the things, and it's basically explaining and trying to prove to you that that sex and gender and expression and identity are all different things, and they're all part of the genderbread. And I remember being in those classes and not really also being at a point in my faith where I truly had the understanding of what the word said. So I was also in the mentality of I'll love you by showing approval, and so I also was one of 40 people in this cohort, so I wasn't going to be like, wrong. Yeah. I was just learning, and I saw these people who seemed to care and to love. I had some of the most caring, loving teachers I've ever had in my credential program, but they all believed some of this gobbledygook.
Interesting. That's super interesting that I asked you that question, and then you share your thoughts and your feelings, and then you get to the point where you actually experienced it firsthand. And I'm gonna jump on the other side and be like, I 100% think that school is government led, and then the government uses that to indoctrinate and build what they're striving to build for whatever reason they're trying to do it. No one knows. But I mean, and I've talked to a lot of homeschool parents, and my dad and his 4 brothers and 2 sisters, all teachers, public schools out in Portland. Portland.
Dang.
And then my mom mom is in Portland and the Bay Area for 35 years teaching. And then her brothers and sisters were teachers as well. And so I grew up in it, in around teachers, and I would love to have my mom here on this episode, but maybe one of these times. But she can't even fathom what is going on right now, or why, and she's the ultimate believer, and so she's just like, this is not great. And so talking to some of these these parents and teachers and whatnot, it's gotten to the point, and I'm going to share another quote. And I heard it. I think I sent it to you via social media. And me and Aaron, I bug him so much. Just things that we're going to talk about on our episodes, I send over to you. You check out, and we kind of discuss, and I use some of that on here. But there's another quote that hit me hard, and I think we can go off on this. Is don't be surprised when you send your kids off to Caesar, and they come back as Romans. And I look at that and I'm like, yes, that's the school system now. Another reason why I won't send my kids to public school. There's no reason for it. And not even just public school. You were just talking about the Masters, right?
It was a private school.
It's a private school.
Yeah.
Private college down in Southern California.
Yeah.
And so to hear that, I'm just like, whoa. So school just in general, like, it seems like every single teacher at this point has free reign to teach their feel and their perception, and you know what I mean? And so I'm viewing it that way. Like, you don't, unless you know who's teaching your kid, and parents, and I'm going to kind of go off on your profession right now, but parents are handing their kids over at 7:30 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. What's that, 8 hours?
Yeah.
8 hours, and you're letting people who you truly don't probably know
at all,
with free reign these days, to teach and mold and shape your kids the way they feel fit.
Yeah.
And then if you have a problem with it, and there's certain aspects of it where they have secrets with your kids that they keep from you. Yeah,
dude, that part is like messed up.
And it's okay.
So, I'm not about that.
No.
And I can't do that. But I still have, and we could go on another rabbit hole here too, but I have a really hard time, kind of trying to figure out how to navigate, speaking to some of my kids that are, that are transgender, and so, because obviously on one hand, like I want to love them. I want to show them love, but I also don't want to, tell them or encourage them that I believe the same things, or that I encourage them to think the same the things that they're doing.
It's what you were just talking about.
Right.
It's you're not agreeing, you're loving them, but
Yeah.
you're not in agreement. It's like Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Jesus has his word and his ways and how he says it is, and what the image of God looks like and all that. Jesus went and sat with people who were making wrong, sat with sinners. They changed. He didn't.
Totally.
He didn't. He stayed who he was, but he loved them. He broke bread with them. He spent time with them. And that's where people get Christianity all mixed up.
Yeah.
Oh, you're Christian, so you hate me.
Yeah.
I don't hate you. I have a family member who is going through something like that. Do I hate them? Absolutely not. Never, ever. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to love. But that doesn't mean we agree and support that.
Yeah.
We support them, the human being. But you don't have to agree with the sin, because that's how I feel. That's what I feel that is. And we'll talk about that more in depth, I'm sure, in separate episodes. But I mean, giving your kids to the government for their entire childhood is allowing the government to raise your kids.
Yeah.
With the help of social media and video games, etc.
Totally. I mean, an English teacher, if you haven't read Fahrenheit 451, guys, definitely read that. It's a word of warning for the future. And what they have in that futuristic society is, in that futuristic society, they basically take kids as they're born. Like, in the first 2 months, they take the kids and they educate them, and then the parents just basically do their own thing, and then they have them back 2 weekends a month, and that's kind of the society that is in this futuristic thing. And it's like, dude, we're getting to that. I live over, in Meridian, and I'm walking my dog every day at when I do, not every day, when I do, it's 4:30, and these kids from elementary school are getting off the bus.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Why is that kid just getting home? I got home an hour ago.
Yeah. And they get home for what? And which leads me to my next point.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, because you simply will not be able, if you send, in my opinion, if you send your kid to a public school or school in general, you simply will not be able to log enough hours to counteract all the poison and time wasting and ideological propaganda garbage that they are fed year after year after year. And then you see them at dinner, and then you go watch their sporting events, or you drop them off at practice. And
even more than just the things that are being taught, I feel like one of the hardest things is the person next to you. It's I feel like there's a moment where every kid, and maybe not every kid, but there's a moment for most kids where they remember, and maybe you remember the time, where there was a kid that was cooler than you, who did basically nothing, and got all the girls, or was really popular, or whatever, and you're like, I could do nothing.
Yeah.
And it's just this kind of environment of, they call it social loafing. Well, hey, that guy's doing it, I won't do it. Or enough people are caring that I don't need to.
Yeah.
Enough people are focused that I don't need to. And I think when there's a reason why there's not successful teams in corporate America of 50 people, of 30 people. There's successful teams of 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's crazy.
Because higher accountability, higher responsibility level. And let's get to the data here. It's data. We looked up a lot of different statistics and probably about 15 different studies on homeschooling achievement. And there were no studies that said that homeschoolers got lower scores.
Yeah.
Every single study I looked at, homeschoolers have about 15 to 30% higher scores on achievement tests. 78% of peer-reviewed studies in the world on academic achievement show that homeschooled students perform significantly better than those in institutionalized schools. And more importantly, studies show that they have a higher, compared to public school, homeschooling kids have a higher level of cooperation, assertion, responsibility, and self-control.
Wow.
What else do you want in a kid?
Wow. 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 100%.
We had a conversation today. We had a PD day and a planning day for the next semester. And one of the things we talked about was, we need to have more control of these devices and things like that. I'm like, how about we teach kids self-control?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Instead of, trying to say, hey, here's a medicine for your symptoms. Let's look at what you've been eating.
Yeah.
Let's get to the
which is a whole nother episode.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So,
but I do, and the thing that I hear most about homeschoolers is, they're going to be socially awkward. Well, or social.
Yeah, right.
Be weird.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something, okay? In 1995, when I was 10 years old and I was going to school, homeschoolers, like, don't homeschool your kid because they'll be the weird kid. Mm-hmm. But now in 2024, there's kids in public schools who are identifying as farm animals.
Yeah. I'd rather be the weird kid, so quote unquote.
100%.
Yeah.
And so for me, it used to be said back in the day that sending your child to college was playing Russian roulette with their values, right? And I went to college, a couple colleges.
Yeah.
And I can understand that. But now that is true for elementary school, high school, middle school as well. But and not just their values, also their mental health, their maturity, their happiness, all those things you're playing Russian roulette with because of what's being allowed and what is being pushed. And people don't have to like it, and they can try to come up with excuses with it. And a lot of people who think about homeschooling, it was crazy. I had a real estate agent call me this morning about one of my properties, and before, small talk at first, and she was like, yeah, we're thinking about maybe homeschooling our kids. I said, oh, man, I think you should. And she's like, I just don't know if I'd be able to do it. And so we got into that conversation, and it was crazy because a lot of people don't think they can do it.
Totally.
I was like, if you're at home, for us, realistically, our day, we wake up around 8:30, 9 o'clock, and our kids get going around 9:30, and they're done by about 11:30. And then which homeschool friends you want to go play with? Yeah. Do you want to go to jump time? Do you want to go play some soccer? Do you want to go to the YMCA and go swimming? Like that's they have the activity, they have their schooling that they have to get done. Sometimes it takes 2.5 to 3 hours. Yeah. Sometimes it takes an hour. It's really up to them. And there's a lot within that, spending the time, disciplining appropriately, all those things. There's so much value. But at the same time, not everybody's able to do it because of jobs and all that. But I can't say it enough. Like, if you have an opportunity to do it, I think you're missing out if you don't. That's my opinion.
Well, no, I mean, I was blind to this whole homeschool situation, honestly, until I came to Idaho, really. And then we have some family members who homeschool here, and I was like, how do you do that? How does it work? Whatever. Once again, I grew up with the stigma of just like everybody's weird from homeschooling, and it's just now there's so many of these co-ops. There are homeschooling opportunities where kids can play sports. They can. I had a student last semester, and I found out halfway through the semester that she only takes 2 classes at the school, and she takes the rest of them homeschool. And I didn't know she had the opportunity to do that. And just by taking 2 classes, she also qualifies for cross country.
Really?
So she can play sports at the high school, and she can also then, have her religious foundation at home, have, whatever else she needs. I think she takes a class at CWI or something like that. It's like, I don't know, that's like life where you don't go to the same, you don't do this every single day and drown yourself out. I tell my students too, I'm like, this is just not a normal scenario where you have 8 different managers that are assigning you 8 different things, and all 8 of them don't have any idea what the other one is doing. And you have 2 parents, and you might have a coach, and you might have an actual manager of your job, and somehow you need to fit that all in and keep them all happy. Like, that doesn't exist in our world. Yeah. So why are we doing that for 18 years?
And if kids can't handle it, let's drug them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's drug them up.
I would have been so drugged. Like, I was bouncing off the walls all the time. I was put in this class where eventually, basically, the only reason I was, like, I didn't really care about class as much because I could get my stuff done in 2 minutes, and then I would just talk to the person next to me or throw some stuff, and so and then I got into this math class, and because I would talk too much, like, I was kicked out of the math class. I had to spend the entirety of 3rd grade every time they did math in the corner.
Yeah. That's good for the kid,
right?
That's great for you.
Yeah, because she didn't know how to handle me.
Out this way.
But that's why I have such a passion too for education, because it's that, there's one moment that you had where you just decided school's not for me.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the vast majority of students have that moment, and I think it happens way too soon. And then you have to realize, like I did, 25, 26 years into your life, like, oh, wow, learning is cool. I love it. I've always loved it. I've just been in an environment that made me hate it.
Yeah, 100%. And wow, I didn't know you were the kid in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
So was I.
I don't know if you know this, too. I'm an English teacher because I hated English class.
I did not know that.
Hated them all. Never read one book. I read all the books of my sophomore year teacher, and because I loved her and she was awesome and she actually cared. I read 0 books freshman, junior, and senior year.
Wow.
0. Got an A.
So you wanted to be an English teacher because you knew that they were needed.
Yeah, well, it was more like I started. I was in sales for a long time, and I dropped that. Kind of just wasn't in the right place. Average of the 5 people you hang out with the most, and 5 people I was hanging out with the most were not good for me.
Yeah.
And so I dropped that, and then I started kind of a search to try to figure out what I wanted to do. Then I realized I wanted to wanted to coach because I love the mentorship aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized coaching makes like negative money.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, all right, what else can I do here? Maybe I should teach. And I just had a passion for high school because it's such a confusing time. And I'm like, well, I like math, I like science, I like history, but I hated English. I bet I could make it fun,
Yeah.
And so that's what I try to do.
Man. Well, I bet you do, and I get feedback because I've coached some of your kids. I know some of your kids, and I haven't heard one negative thing or boring thing about you. So you're doing a good job, Mr.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I love it,
dude. I want to read. Let's see. What did I have here?
Well, yeah, and real quick, we rolled a lot longer on that first topic than I expected to. So let's talk a little about school choice, and then we can kind of wrap a few things up in general, and maybe add anything else that you want to. But school choice has been a really interesting thing over the last several months. I mean, it's been something that over the last several years has been popping up throughout the country. But basically, school choice is an idea where it gives parents the option to send their kids wherever they want. And so, sounds great, right? And I think, and there's so many positives. And the more I look into this, there's just such an interesting, like, I personally right now don't know how I feel about it, and because there's some positives, there's some negatives. Obviously, there's this aspect of, hey, if you want to go to a school that's more focused on architecture or culinary or, auto shop, then you should be able to do those things. However, then all of those schools are still public schools.
Yeah.
If you want to do homeschooling, that's your choice, but you're not getting any funding, even though you're a taxpayer. And so that's kind of where I don't know. Do you guys get funding for your homeschooling? How does that work?
We did. My wife used Tech Trep, and they give you a certain amount of money per student to, purchase things that you can use for school or physical activities. Like we could go get to passes to the trampoline park. We would get Beats headphones because they do learning. They learn how to read. And
music and stuff.
So you get a certain amount of allotted to you, and you spend that on them and whatnot. But other than that, it's minimal. I think it was $1,400 per kid for the year, and my wife was like, not worth it. So we switched up the curriculum, and but no, not now.
Yeah.
So no.
Well, I mean, currently, I believe numbers aren't perfect, but I know as a high schooler, you get I think $4,700 as a public high schooler in Idaho to use as called flash forward or fast forward funds. And you can use it to apply to colleges, you can use it to take tests, you can use it to do all these things. But I'm like, okay, if my kid is in high school and he's being homeschooled, where's my $5,000? Yeah. And so on one hand, I think that there are a lot of really awesome things about this school choice aspect. But then I also see, obviously if everybody's going to homeschool or going to private schools, that affects my job.
Yeah.
And there's increased competition then for that. But then I don't know, I feel like increased competition is kind of the point. Like when there's more people, when there's more competition, there's usually better products. It's usually less expensive. It's usually more flexible. And so, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about education or iPods. I mean, it's like that's the way our capitalistic system has worked. And so I like that, but I think that's something too that, you guys out there who have maybe a more understanding of this school choice or pros and cons too, I'd love to hear more about that from you guys because I'm constantly learning more about these things too, because there are other states apparently that have more of a school choice system, but they have what's called a voucher system. So instead of that like $16,000 per public school kid that's given to them over the course or that's used for them over the course of their education, then that voucher would then be given to the parents. There's a lot of pros to that, but then also you can imagine like a morally upright, ethically conscious person like you and me would spend that money for their education. But then now there are going to maybe be people who don't. Yeah. I mean, we know what the foster system looks like here. I mean, and it's So I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on it so far?
Yeah, that last part kind of got me. I mean, a lot of people are going to, I mean, that's like, honestly, for some people, that's going to be like putting your kid to work to make you some money, like in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, it might as well be viewed as, you know, making them get a job almost. But I do like that people can hone in on something that they're interested in, they're passionate about. For me, I was always learning at my best and, you know, locked in when I'm passionate about something. It's the same to this day.
Totally.
Like, if I'm not in it 100%, I'm not passionate about it, or I don't care much about it, I kind of start to fade. And so I like that aspect of it. I do like the aspect of it too, that they offer those things, but you know, our system, like, there's just so much taking advantage of, and there's so much backdooring, and there's so much, all those things. So you're, like you said, pros and cons. I would have to think on that a little bit more. You just educated me on that. I know we had talked briefly about it a couple weeks ago before we were going to do this episode, and we ended up doing fatherhood. But that's really interesting. I'm going to have to look more in on that. But it sounds like there's definitely pros and cons. But ultimately, you're not talking me out of homeschool.
Yeah,
you're not
totally.
Yeah, I mean that's just what it is. I do like this aspect of it, but ultimately the freedom and the ability to kind of do the same thing yourself with your kids.
Yeah.
As you get into the reading, writing, math, okay, the fundamentals there, and then it's, you know, you start to figure out what they like. I have one daughter that loves horses, so we implement horses into lessons.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great. And she's excited about it.
Yeah.
And she wants to learn and do these projects and do these things. It's so, like I said, pros and cons, I'd have to look more into it, but ultimately when it comes to the public schools and everything going on, like I keep saying, you know, the agenda, the Antichrist agenda, if
totally.
you will, for me, and the brainwashing and the transhumanism and the social insanity, to be just completely transparent on it, it's just, there's no way for me now. So if things like this are happening where, you know, I don't know, man, I just, it's just homeschool or bust for me at this point.
Yeah.
I won't let my kids probably send their kids to a public school. Who knows what it's going to look like
at
that point. Like, day by day.
Yeah, right. But I think if we were all kind of in our own little communities, learning in the community and kind of, once again, from parents, I think, once again, that's biblical. Mm-hmm. That's the way it's been. And, you know, there's arguments all the time like, well, life has changed. The world has changed. Exactly. And we're supposed to be called to stay to the word. You know, Romans 12:2. You know, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It's just, we're just constantly hit by everyone's just, well, let's just do the new thing. You know, let's just be okay with this. Well, back then, oh, that's stuffy and old, you know, but it's like, no, it's not stuffy and old. It's the most relevant book that's ever been written in the history of the world, and it was written by 40 dudes.
Yeah.
Like
66 books. And there hasn't been a hole found in it. I sent you something the other day where there was a young LDS kid who was on his mission, and he was asked some questions by a Christian pastor, and the response from the young Mormon kid was, well, the Bible has been translated in many ways, and things have been lost within that. Well, my question to that is, you know, in the Bible it says my word is and always will be, and then it also
and it's final,
and there's no holes in it regardless of the translation. Have we found a hole in it as it's been translated into different languages and King James to the NIV? Is there a hole in it yet? No, there's not.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? For me, I was like, that's such a brutal excuse. But I mean, man, you said Romans 12:2, which is the first tattoo I ever got. It's right here on my left arm. So you say it gives me chills. I'm like, cool, man. But there's also a verse, Deuteronomy, talks about, like, teach children up in the way they should go and whatnot. You just said it. The word, this is how it used to be. Like, you know, like I talked about last episode, families and so parents and their kids lived with their parents, and the grandparents helped raise the kids, and that's where kids were taught and schooled and whatnot. And so the change, and I did not know. The first thing I think you said was in the 1700s, I believe, school ultimately was an extension of Sunday school. More Sunday school.
Yeah.
That right there for me changed my life when you said that. I'm like, whoa, that's just confirmation.
Yeah, you're doing what you're supposed to be.
That you're doing what you're supposed to be, and it was all Bible centered, Bible founded by the Bible. You're Sunday school. That's what you're doing in Sunday school. You're learning about the Word of God, and school started to do more of that.
Yeah.
And now we're at where we're at. That ain't it.
It's disappointing.
It is disappointing. I haven't said it. My heart hurts.
And then you look at it. It's like it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense in terms of what we deal with. I mean, we got attention spans of like 8 seconds now. I read that goldfish have higher attention spans than we do now. It's dropped 25% in the last even 10 years in terms of our attention spans. And so, what do you think is going to happen? Like, we can't physically get through 3 verses here.
Yeah.
So how are we going to continue to teach it and to have a passion behind it and teach it throughout the week if there's just the next TikTok?
Yeah.
It's a tough thing.
It's really tough.
All right. Well, I think that's where we'll wrap it up here today. But once again, thank you guys so much for listening. Please comment, share, subscribe on whatever platform you guys happen to be listening or watching on today. And once again, if you think you know anybody who might be interested in sponsoring this podcast, please reach out to us at the Present Life Podcast on Instagram. And as of now, time to live in the present. See you all in the future.